Oh, hi, good morning, everyone. My name is Victor Zavala. I'm a faculty member here in the Department of Chemical and Biological Engineering. So I'm happy to provide this short perspective on the work that we do in my research group. So one of the core skills that you gain as a systems engineer, which is precisely what we do in my group, is the ability to abstract problems. Abstraction, you can also think about it as a mathematical modeling approach to different types of systems. So for example, I can represent two different types of applications here in infrastructure networks, so here in the metabolic network as a graph. So the graph provides a unifying abstraction that allows me to think about the different components of the network and how they're interacting. So these abstractions are very useful because they allow me to generalize different types of common features that we see in these applications. And that allows me also to transfer knowledge and techniques across domains. So for example, you might ask yourself, how does the cell enable robust behavior and how we can use that knowledge to better inform the design of robust infrastructures. Now in my group, I like to think about how do we motivate these mathematical abstractions and algorithms that we develop. So there are three main areas that currently are leading our research. So one of them is energy. So we're thinking about how are we going to decarbonize the energy infrastructure? How are we going to electrify different types of technologies? We're also doing a lot of work in materials, which is informing a lot of our machine learning and data science work. How do we design materials that are responsive, that have certain properties of interest? And sustainability is also a core topic nowadays. Here in this space, we're thinking a lot about how do we design infrastructures for recycling plastic waste. And I'll tell you a little bit about that in a second. Now, in terms of the more mathematical work that we do in the group, so I like to categorize it in three main components. One of them is the development of software and algorithms. So once you develop these abstractions, once you develop these models, you need to solve them numerically. And the challenge here is that many of these models are very large, and you need to rely on high-performance computers, on parallel computers, to be able to do it. So we develop software and we develop algorithms that allow us to use those hardware architectures. We're also looking a lot into value chains and markets and trying to understand complex interdependencies that appear between different stakeholders. So for example, that's something that relies on graph theory and also some concepts of economics and also optimization. And the third big pillar in technical areas is data learning and statistics. So we're developing different types of techniques to analyze data from different perspectives, images, complex graphs, complex data sets that arise in different types of applications. So this is kind of just a quick snapshot of the team that we currently have in the group. I'm very proud of my team. So we have a quite diverse group of people that come from different backgrounds and also have different types of areas of interest and skills. So some of them are more interested in applications and trying to identify social impact of technologies. Some of them are more interested in the technical aspects of software development, optimization, things like this. And we have also grouped people that are interested in the theory, like trying to understand convergence properties of algorithms. And I think that all this group together tries to work as a team in trying to solve complex problems. The other thing I want to highlight with this slide is that I co-advise a lot of students. So for example, here in red, I'm showing you some of the students that are co-advised with different members of the faculty in the department, and that enriches the experience, I feel, of the students. And this is a manifestation of this. So in the department, we have a strong collaborative culture. This is particularly helpful in my domain because I'm a systems engineer, so I like to think about very different types of systems precisely and trying to identify common features and commonalities across those applications. So for example, I work with the group of Ophelia Venturelli into trying to identify microbial communities using machine learning techniques that perform certain functions. I'm working with Brian Fleger in developing processes that can capture phosphorus efficiently and try to design cyanobacteria that can do this function. I'm working with Professor Huber and other members in the department, like Yves Hermans and also Reed Van Len, into designing processes that enable plastic recycling. With Matt Gevy and Marcel Schreier, I've also started collaborations in the space of electrochemistry and trying to understand phenomena that happens at small scales, but also how do they integrate with the power grid. And we have other applications like molecular dynamics and soft materials. So I think that we have a broad range of interests. And again, we're just trying to find those unifying perspectives on different types of problems that will allow us to solve different types of applications. We are affiliated with a number of institutions inside UW-Madison and also outside UW-Madison. So we're part, for example, of the Materials Research Science and Engineering Center, MERSIC, that we do a lot of data science types of applications with them, Wisconsin Energy Institute, Department of Industrial Systems Engineering, and the Center for Upcycling of Waste Plastics. And also we have an industrial consortium, which is the Texas, Wisconsin, California Control Consortium, which is very important because it allows to interact with industry and trying to understand what are the priorities that they see, and that informs some of our research. Some of our members of our group go into summer interns. So I typically encourage my students to go to at least 2 summer internships. So they go to different places. So for example, they go to Argonne National Lab. So I'm affiliated with Argonne National Lab, and that facilitates kind of those internships. But they also go to other national labs like Sandia, Los Alamos, and they also go to companies like Dow Chemical, for example, Procter & Gamble, ExxonMobil. Now, let me just give you very quickly some example of the type of research that we're doing. So as I mentioned, we have the Center for Upcycling of Waste Plastic, which is a big Department of Energy initiative that involves multiple faculty in the department. And one of the things that we're doing here is trying to design infrastructures for plastic recycling. What type of technologies are going to be most viable in doing this? What type of pathways we should be following for recycling pathways, for recycling plastic, I'm sorry. And also the ultimate question is, can we create a circular economy for plastics that take plastic waste and try to recover the main plastics from scratch? So one of the things that we do, and don't get too scared with all the math all at once, but one of the things that we do here is trying to model the interdependencies of all these technologies. And we do this through supply chain modeling. So supply chain modeling is basically an optimization technique that allows us to understand what technologies should be placed where, what is the size of those technologies, how do I transform one product into another product that will be creating this value chain, which is a really interesting area that leads also to very challenging optimization problems because they tend to be very large scale. So that's one of the areas that we're applying to this plastic recycling. And one of the interesting insights that this type of work give you, more than the actual placement of technologies, which is also very important, but it also reveals the inherent value of different products in the supply chain. And one particular one that is of key interest in plastic recycling is precisely the value of plastic waste. So if you're interested in developing an infrastructure that generates value from plastic waste, that means that you also care about the value of that plastic waste. And something that we have observed in our simulations is that this plastic waste actually can become a very valuable resource if we are going to be producing valuable chemicals from it. And we are able to estimate what those valued plastic can be in different regions of the United States. So we solve some big optimization problems to do this type of study. We're also working with the group of Reed Van Len and with George Huber into analyzing this interesting approach for recycling plastic waste that comes in the form of multi-layer films. These multi-layer films, you find them a lot in food products because they are multifunctional materials that allow you to block oxygen, that allow you to block light, temperature, and that has a big impact in our ability to protect food. But at the same time, they're hard to recycle. So one approach that recently has become very interesting in doing this is doing solvent-based separation of these plastic films. And basically what we're doing with them is doing techno-economic analysis and integrating molecular simulations with systems engineering techniques to try to identify what are the best solvents and what is the best sequence for the separation in the process. And one interesting aspect of this is not only the economics of the process, but also the environmental benefits of this process and also the environmental impacts of the process. So we're also doing life cycle assessment, trying to understand how these solvents affect the environment or can potentially be designed in a way that we protect the environment. So that's work that we're also leading as part of this research. Now, another big area that is of interest in our group is machine learning and data analysis. So for example, in the context of plastics, we've been working with a group in Michigan Tech University that is developing a fast approach for characterizing plastic waste. So the big problem with plastic waste is that it typically appears in the form of mixtures. So it's very hard to actually know what is exactly in a big stream of plastic. So they have developed an approach based on a spectra that in real time collects information about these different pellets of plastic. And we pass this through a machine learning algorithm that tells exactly what pellet is going to be. And that allows us to get some idea of what is present in that plastic waste. Once we know what is present in that plastic waste, then that is very useful information when you feed the plastic waste to a process, for example, pyrolysis or the strap process, as it will facilitate the separation. Another big area of research that we have in the group is topological data analysis. So this is an area that we recently started exploring. And turns out that one thing that we have found out is that topology and geometry are two interesting areas of mathematics that allow us to precisely have a unifying view of the world. So for example, you can try to understand what type of topological features emerge when I mix a set of polymers in solution, what type of topology fluid will generate as it evolves over time, what type of topology we have for surfaces and how that influences their activity, what topology you can form with different solvent environments, particularly, for example, for the strap process or for the processing of biomass, and also how complex systems are interconnected and what are the topological features that emerge from that. And just to give you a very tangible example of the type of work that we do here, the key idea is that we want to take data that comes in the form of a complex object. For example, here is a three-dimensional arrangement of molecules, of water molecules in a solvent environment. And what we're trying to do is to extract the key topological features of that complex environment. And for example, one of these topological features is the so-called Euler characteristic. This Euler characteristic is a curve that allows me to summarize the topological features of the solvent environment. And once you have this reduced representation of the system, then you can start asking yourself, well, can I actually observe changes in the topology as I change the composition of the solvent environment? And that's precisely what we have found through molecular simulations. Depending on what type of solvent we introduce into the system, we can actually alter the topology. That gives me the ability to control the topology of the system. And one thing that we have observed is that this topology influences the reactivity in the environment for a particular molecule. And that's very important for experimental people to understand, because many of these phenomena cannot be obtained through experiments. It has to be observed implicitly through molecular simulations. So this is, again, just one example on how we use molecular simulations. So I hope that this quick talk gives you an idea of how my group is structured, some of the problems that motivate our research, and also some tangible examples of the type of work that we're doing. If you're more interested in learning more about the work that we do, I invite you to visit our website, or just feel free to send me an email and I can point you into the right direction to find more information. So thank you so much for your attention. See you soon.